But they have to go through this stage. In order for the man to develop a feminine side, and in order for the woman to develop a masculine side, they can't rush to that stage. They have to accept their body and their gender, including the stereotypical baggage or associations or roles that go along with this. This video was made possible through the kind support of my sponsors over at Patreon. Patreon is a great way to help independent creators like myself produce original content. If you'd like to get more English language videos from me, please consider becoming a supporter via Patreon. You can find the link in the description below. Thank you very much. So our topic for today is masculinity and femininity, and more in particular, how to inter-include them. What do I mean by inter-include them? I mean, how can a man cultivate a feminine aspect within him without him becoming effeminate in the negative sense? And how can a woman develop a masculine side to her without becoming overly masculine in a negative way? How can we preserve, maintain our own connection, the simple, natural connection to our own gender, our own bodies, our role in this world, while at the same time not succumb to the simplistic stereotypes that are often, we feel that they narrow us down. And we need to create more space, a bit more of something like akin to a spectrum within our own psyches, that we can feel more free. We don't have to subscribe to all the characteristics of our gender, but on the other hand, we don't want to betray our gender. So we want to, this is the inter-inclusion of masculinity and femininity. It's each one having an aspect of the other one, but in a good way, in a healthy way. And we want to examine all this through Avraham and Sarah, Abraham and Sarah, our first and mother and father. And as we'll see in this class, we're going to zoom into their relationship, and we're going to see them face some difficulties in their relationship, some marital issues and troubles, and we'll see those issues resolved. And we'll see that the problems actually derive from the fact that they weren't able to properly maintain this balance of integrating the trait of the opposite gender into their personality, and it was resolved when they were finally able to do so. This is the topic of our class. And the story is actually, it crosses two portions. So we start at the previous portion of Lech Lecha, and then we transition into this portion of Vayera, and the transition is in itself a meaningful one, as we'll see. So our story begins deep into the narrative of Avraham and Sarah. We've been introduced to them, and they undergo adventures, and they come all the way from Haran to Eretz Israel, and then they go to Egypt, they come back from Egypt, there's a lot of things going on. Avraham goes to wage a war, he comes victorious from that war. And everything seems to be going great, except the main thing is missing. What is the main thing? Abraham is supposed to be the first generation in a new mission, a new vision that he's supposed to give to the world. And this is supposed to happen through his progeny, but he has no progeny. His wife is sterile, as all our matriarchs, all our mothers were. She's the first one, she's barren. And we were told this from the very beginning, the end of Parashat Noach, when we were just introduced to them. We are told this fact, because it becomes meaningful later on. And now it becomes center stage, this problem, this issue. So at some point, Avraham, this is the previous parasha, he's praying to God that he wants to have progeny, and God reveals himself to him, and he tells him that he will have a lot of progeny, and then the story then follows. This is chapter 16 of Genesis. It says, "V'Sarai eshet Avram lo yalda lo," and Sarai, as she was then called, the wife of Avram, as he was then called, lo yalda lo, did not give birth to him. And then it says, "Vela shifcha mitzrit ushma Hagar," and she had an Egyptian handmaid whose name was Hagar. And then, "V'tomer Sarai el Avram," Sarai says to Avram, "Hinena atzarani Hashem miledet," God has stopped me from giving birth. "Bo na'el shifchati," come to my handmaid, come and know my handmaid. "Ulai ibane mimena," maybe I will be built through her. this was apparently a sort of common solution in olden days. Obviously, they didn't have a surrogate mother with our technology, but there was a kind of a surrogacy in which the handmaiden gave birth, and it was considered, the father was of course the same father, was considered not her own child, but the child of her mistress. And we know that this is typical because the same thing will happen again with Yaakov and his wives. The exception actually is Yitzchak. Yitzchak and Rivka, they're so monogamous, they cling to each other so well that they don't even consider bringing in a handmaiden. They just daven really hard, they pray really hard until it's answered and they get their twins. So this is what she's saying. And of course this is not a very joyful thing. You know that we're told that Abraham had 10 nisyonot, 10 trials throughout his life. This is told in the Mishnah, but there's no detailed list of what the trials were, and there are several opinions as to what the trials were. And interesting, if you look at all the opinions, Maimonides, Rambam, is the only opinion that says something very beautiful. He says that one of the nisyonot was being with Hagar. It was one of the big nisyonot for him. He didn't want it at all. He just wanted Sarah. And just being with Hagar and bringing that child to the world was one of his nisyonot. He's the only person who says that, Maimonides. The others, all the opinions overlap partially, but this one is unique to Maimonides. It's a very interesting thing to look at. So, anyway, that's what he does. Vayishma Avram lekol Sarai. Avram listens to his wife's voice, and he does what she tells him. And then she gives him Hagar, and he comes to her, and she becomes pregnant. And as she becomes pregnant, and she sees that she's pregnant, Vatekal gvirta be'enea. She begins to disrespect her mistress. She begins to view her lightly. Why? Because she knows that God has revealed himself to Abraham, and told Abraham that he is to carry the torch and to begin this legacy of monotheism, to bringing to the world, and it's the most important thing in the entire world. And it looks like that it's going to happen through her, and not through Sarah, because they don't know what's going to happen next. And meanwhile, it's the only child, and so she says to herself, I'm far more important than my mistress. Years she's been waiting to get pregnant and was unable to, and in one time, I got pregnant, so I must be as important, more important than her, as important as Abraham, and so on. And so she treats her lightly. Vatekal gvirta be'enea. And then begins a scene, we'll say an unpleasant scene. We are privy to a domestic argument, a dispute, a fight. They're fighting. Abraham and Sarah are fighting. And it gets worse and worse with every stage. So it starts like this. Vatomer Sarai el Avram, Sarai says to Avram, Chamasi alecha. So this is harsh in and of itself. Chamasi alecha is what has been stolen from me, taken from me, it's on you. What has been stolen from her? So she says, Anochi natati shivchati bechekecha, I gave you my handmaid. Vatereh ki harata, and she saw that she was pregnant. Va'ekal be'enea. And I became light in her eyes. She disrespects me. And then she doesn't say anymore, but then she says, Yishpot Hashem beni uvenecha, God shall judge this thing that's going on between us. What is she angry at? What is being taken away from her? What's being taken away from her is his looking after her. He is not looking after her. He's not standing up to her. He is supposed to stand up and how do you say limchot, mecha'ah, to protest. He is meant to stand up and protest and put Hagar in her place, and he doesn't do so. So what is taken away from her? It's her dignity, her honor is taken away from her, and he is the one taking it away. She's not surprised at Hagar behaving the way she behaves, but he's supposed to be there as a loyal husband and to stand up and to silence Hagar or to punish Hagar or to do something to prove that this is unacceptable. two more interpretations as to what has been stolen from her. Another interpretation is that what has been stolen from her is the child itself. Why the child itself? Because if you go to the previous chapter, when Avraham prayed to God that he would give him a child, he used the first person singular and not the first person plural. He says, "Ma titen li v'anochi ariri." What should you give me, singular, and for I am without child. He didn't say, what should you give us, for we us without child. He said, what should you give me? So God listened to him and he gave him a child. But because he used the first person singular, he only gave it to him and he gave it through Hagar. If he would have said, if he would have davened, please give us a child, we are without child, it would have been obvious, would have been Sarah. And so you have to be careful what you wish for. And he wasn't careful what he wished for, and that says something about him, about their relationship. So she's saying, you took away my child. Now you're taking away my dignity, the dignity that is supposed to be mine. And you're taking away from me the words that you needed to say. Right? These are the three interpretations. You should say something, you're not saying it. This whole disrespect is something that is robbed from me. My honor is robbed from me. And the very fact that was before, she could have been angry before, but this was like the last straw. She could have been angry at the fact that he davened for himself to begin with. But now that this is added, the fact that now Hagar is misbehaving, is mistreating her, and he's not standing up to her, it's sort of all bursting. So we have a situation here is that she's suddenly shouting at him and being angry at him and judging him and saying, God will judge between us. And there's another tiny little detail here that's standing out. When she says, Ishpot Hashem beni uvenecha, God shall judge between me and you, when she says the words beinecha, between you, there's an added yud, a little letter that's added here. Beinecha should have been bet yud nun chaf. There's another yud there, it's bet yud nun yud chaf. Another little yud is added. Whenever the Torah adds an extra word, we have to pay attention, we say what it means. And what Chazal said is that extra letter, which by the way, it's considered a masculine letter. Why? Because the two basic letters that connote gender are yud and the hey. Why? Because the word ish is esh with a yud, and the word isha is esh with a hey. So yud is masculine and the hey is feminine. Her own name change, which is forthcoming, is from a relatively speaking masculine name, Sarai, ends with a yud, to a classic feminine name that ends with a hey. Right? Classic feminine words, even nouns, end with a hey. Same goes for feminine names. Not that there are many exceptions. There are. We have Tamar, we have Esther, we have Rachel, we have a lot of it. But the classic name, feminine, ends with a hey. And here we have that extra yud. This is a hint that there was something masculine about her outburst. And Chazal also say that with that yud, she put extra anger. She put what we call the evil eye. It's like a little bit of a curse, a subconscious curse. And it actually caused Hagar to lose that pregnancy. That pregnancy was not yet Ishmael. She lost this pregnancy because of this very harsh rebuke that Sarah burst out in relation to Abraham. And later, she got another pregnancy, and that was Ishmael. So there's something, that the energy here is extremely high, volatile, and there's anger. So this is bad in and of itself. And again, we're privy to this domestic argument, which isn't a pleasant sight, let's say. And it gets worse. Why? What is Abraham's reaction? He says probably the worst thing you can imagine a husband answering in such an argument. He says, well, she's your handmaid. You can do whatever you want with her. What do you want from me? She's your handmaid. And he isn't lying. And we were told from the very beginning that Hagar belongs to Sarah. Maybe she even inherited her from her father, whatever, it's her own private property. She says, it's yours. It's your responsibility. What do you want from me? I did as I was told. You asked me to give you a child through her. I gave you a child through her. Now she's disrespectful. So what is he doing? He's backing out. She was angry at him for not being more out there, more standing up for her, more present, more caring. And now he recedes even further. And he relinquishes his responsibility even more. And he goes back to just like he prayed only for himself. He's now again, it's hard to say about Avraham Avinu, but we have the pshat. We have to read the pshat. And the pshat here, this is what he's saying. He says, Hine shifchatech v'yadech, your handmaid is in your hands. Asila atov beinech, do whatever you want, whatever is good in your eyes. Now, it gets worse. Why does it get even worse? Sarah is resorted to doing something even less feminine and less royal, we'll say, or, that's in line with her position, with her standing. She begins to sort of torture. That's what it says. Did she tortured her? She made her life miserable. She didn't kick her out, but she just made her life so miserable that she ran away. Hagar ran away. So we have 4 stages here. We start with Avraham praying, but only mentioning himself. Then we have Sarah being angry at him. Then we have Avraham becoming even more sort of passive and not taking responsibility. And then we have Sarah doing something which again is so inappropriate. She's shouting, she's angry, and she treats Hagar so badly that she's forced to run away. And then the angel meets her and tells her to come back and promises to look after her child and so on. What is going on here? So, to our aid comes a midrash. We wouldn't think this midrash is totally connected here, but when we think about it, this midrash really solves the mystery of what's going on here. It gives us the deeper explanation of the real problem in their relationship now. So before I say the midrash, just a little bit of an introduction. According to Chazal, other than men and women, there are other 2 biological cases, special cases, mutations, rare cases, in which the child that's born is neither exactly male nor female. This is something biological. We're not talking about the identity, the inner identity. It's something totally biological and it's real. The one is a case in which there's both masculine and feminine traits. Chazal call this androgynous. It's a Greek word, androgynous, right? Andro is male, gynos is female, or gina. So androgynous is both male and female. And today, in today's medical language, it's called intersex. Intersex is actually a spectrum of phenomena. It's usually a genetic problem that you have like an XXY chromosome or XXYY. And they can't give birth, and it's not clear if they're male or female. There's both male and female traits. And Chazal were aware of this, and they say that this is neither male nor female, and it's a whole topic in Jewish law, in halakha, as to which of the commandments they're obligated or not obligated to do. In fact, there's a whole book, Minchat Chinuch, it's a halachic book, and he goes over all the commandments, and every commandment he mentions if it applies or doesn't apply to an androgynous. So this is a whole topic in and of itself. In many ways, the Jewish law here sort of preceded or anticipated modern law, because for many years they used to have surgery on these babies that were born. It's very rare. But when it happens, they used to do surgeries and then raise them either boy or girl, and they stopped because it was very unpleasant. They weren't really neither. And basically that's what Judaism is saying, that in those rare cases, it's a big question exactly what to do, but you don't say that it's male or female, you say. But that's not the topic here. There's a 4th category. The 4th category is called tumtum. Tumtum means covered up, from the word atum. Tumtum means that a child is either male or female, but you can't tell because the genitalia is covered. It looks like a Barbie doll. You can't tell if it's male or female. It looks like it's neither. So you have male, female, the androgynous is both, and the tumtum is a kind of neither. It's not really an either, but you cannot tell what they are. So the Midrash says, now we get to the Midrash. The Midrash says that Avraham and Sarah were both tumtumim. That's what the Midrash says. Avraham and Sarah were both tumtumim, and God had to change them and turn Avraham into masculine and turn Sarah into feminine. So now let's take all this, and like everything, when we get a Midrash that's so weird, we have to abstract it. We have to understand it spiritually. And we can say maybe it happened when they were babies. But I want to say, no, it has to do with this situation here. Clearly it isn't physical because he just impregnated Hagar and there's a child on the way. But it's something else. It's something more metaphorical, something deeper. So the image here is that there are two Kabbalistic concepts that describe the masculine versus the feminine. And these concepts are called chotam bolet and chotam shokea. What does it mean? Chotam is like a stamp or a seal. When I take a stamp and I seal the wax. And the stamp itself, the ring, whatever it is I'm holding, it's embossed, or it protrudes, and it's called chotam bolet. This is there's another word, not embossed. I just looked it up today, but now I forgot it. For the opposite of engraving, like something that stands out. Never mind. So the chotam bolet is the protruding, or in this case, we'll call it the masculine aspect of the stamp. And the wax that's supposed to be soft is chotam shokea, the seal, the part of the seal that's sort of sunken or absorbed or is impressed by the protruding, embossed seal. So this image is really an image of male and female. And the idea is that in order for the male and female to come together, it also obviously reflects in the anatomy of male and female, of how we look. But it's also something we'll call energetic or spiritual. That the chotam bolet, the protruding seal, has to protrude. It has to be higher. If it's flat, if it's worn out, it can't make an impression, even if the wax is soft. And same goes, even if the seal is great, but the wax is not soft, it can't receive the impression, it also won't work. You have to have both. The male aspect has to go out of himself, so to speak, has this motion or this energy of going forward, going outside of himself. And the feminine aspect, what corresponds to the wax here, has to be softer and be able to receive this impression. If either one doesn't work, you're not going to get the seal. And when you think about the image of them as tumtumim, what it means is that both were sort of flat. He was not a chotam bolet, and she was not a chotam shokea. They were both like Barbie dolls. They were both sort of flat. And it means, basically what it means, is that, and I'm going to use the way we use it today, there were something androgynous about them. His masculinity was not really evolved as it should be. And her femininity was not as evolved as it should be. And now we see it exactly in this fight. What does it mean that Avraham did not think that he should daven using the first person plural, that he should daven on both of them? It means that in our language, he was like self-absorbed or sunk into himself. In Hebrew, when you say self-absorbed, you say shakua be'atzmo. You use the same word as chotam shokea. He was too much, he receded into himself, he thought about himself, thought about his own progeny, if they're coming or not coming, but he didn't not enough. I mean, this is the guy who is opening his tent in all directions, and he's hosting all over the world, and he's all about chesed. But as I often say, it's one thing to be the best host in the world, and to care about the entire universe, and to do the same with your wife. With your wife, it's different. He was able to be masculine with Hagar, but not with his wife. Why? Because Hagar was a bit like an object. She wasn't a subject with her own face and personality and demands and volition. She was like something else almost. But with Sarah, who is a spouse and who is near you and who's close to you, and who confronts you, it's more difficult to be outgoing, and to really come out of yourself. It's one thing easier to come out with everyone in the world, all the strangers, and be the speaker and the host, and to be everyone loves you and you love everyone. But it's tougher with your wife. So regarding his wife, he wasn't able to really express his masculine energy of coming out of himself. But with Sarai, it was the same. There was something about her that she was receded into herself. The opposite. She, with Sarah, she was overbearing or overextending outwards or over demanding. And you see this in the fight. That she is angry at him and she has the outburst, and then she's doing something which is also very masculine by making the life of Hagar miserable. All this is not, again, it's not very feminine. So, and the thing is, this is like a magic cycle, a magic circle. That the more he is feminine, she becomes more masculine, and the more she is masculine, he's becoming more feminine. And each one we can imagine, and we know this from relationships today, and this is happening all too often, that each side would blame the other one for his own lack of masculinity/femininity. So the wife who feels that her husband is not masculine enough, she says, of course I'm masculine, I'm forced to, because he's too passive, and he's not taking the lead, and he's not in charge, and he's not behaving like a man, so I'm forced to, I wish I could be more feminine. But it's because of him, it's not because of me. And if you would ask the husband in such a relationship, he would say the exact same thing. He said, of course she's like castrating me. She's not letting me. She's taking the masculine energy. So of course I become more passive and I don't believe in myself and I feel small and I feel belittled. And this is why we see the back and forth of him, the way he prays and the way her outburst, and then him becoming even more absorbed or receding, and then she becomes even more, again, outward extending, but in a negative sense. Now, so this is like the tumtumim stage. And what is going to make the change? The change comes after this whole incident, in which, by the way, God does not intervene. He lets them go at it, and he lets the fight deteriorate. And we'll see in the continuation that when things are all right, God intervenes. But now he only intervenes in order to save Hagar. Hagar is like the victim of this whole fight. And so God sends an angel to bring her back. But for them, he lets them have this fight. How does it change? It changes with the name change. So just like we have the Midrash that says that they were both tumtumim, which basically means that for Avraham, something had to be built, something had to be added. It's like building a muscle that's not there. You have to extend outward and add something that isn't there. And with Sarah, it's the opposite. She has to sort of let go of something and go on the inside, be chotam shokeh, go deeper in the inside and create the womb. That's what the Midrash says, that God carved her womb because she was, again, in this flat state. So for her, he carved the womb. And with Avraham, he added something, like the two forms of sculpture. You can take, clay. You take clay and you add, and this is the masculine kind of way of building a statue, we'll call this. And you can take a rock or wood and carve or chip away, just like Michelangelo said that the statue is already there. You just have to reveal it by taking away everything that's not the statue. And so with Sarah, it's this kind of sculpture. It's the carving of the womb. And with Avraham, it's the adding of something. Now look at the name change. That's exactly what happens with the name change. From Avram to Avraham, you add a letter. Avraham is not contained within Avram. You had to add a piece of clay. You have to add something for Avram to become Avraham. Masculinity is not something that naturally happens, or that you wait to discover it, or you say, I'm not ready, I feel maybe in a year or two, maybe in some time I'll be more masculine, it'll happen, I'll be ready to get married, I'll be ready to be a father, I'll be ready to... No, it's not going to happen of itself, because you have to add something. You can wait 100 years, and you'll not discover Avraham within Avraham. You have to add a letter that's not there. It's like building a muscle, it isn't there. But from Sarai to Sarah, it looks like just a letter change. You take a letter away, you put another letter in its place. But there's another midrash that says, no, it's not the way it happened. Hashem took the Yud. Yud is 10, the numerical value. He split it into two hay, 5 and 5, two hay. One remained in its place, and the other went to Avraham. To Avram, making him Avraham. Meaning that if you look at the gematria, with him you add 5, with her you take away 5. The sum of Avram plus Sarai equals Avraham plus Sarah. Nothing was It's like, it's just a circulation. But the circulation is now the way it should be. Because from the flat point, something was added for him and something was taken away from her. That is like the carving of the womb, the removal of the yud, and then she has a feminine name. For him, it's also a feminine letter, the hey, but it's not the last letter. It doesn't make it into a feminine word. It adds the fact that he's now going to have even more progeny, of hamon goyim. It adds in a way to his masculinity, adding that hey. And it also strengthens what we said before, that it's like a magic circle. She's all holding on to the masculine energy that he needs to have, and only when she lets go can he have that. Now, it's actually even reflected when God gives them the names. I'm not going to read the verses now, but if you look close at the verses, when he tells him, your name will no longer be Avraham. From now on you shall be called Avraham. That's what God says. It's a new name. You're not going to be called Avraham, and from now on you shall be called Avraham. But a few verses later, when he changes the name of Sarah, he says she will no longer be called Sarai, for Sarah is her name. He doesn't say from now on it shall be her name. He says Sarah is her name. Why? Because Sarah is within Sarai. Sarah is contained within Sarai. So this in and of itself is like a lesson as to how masculinity and femininity are cultivated, are built, or are strengthened. The strengthening of the masculine comes through, again, like building a muscle, adding energy, adding something that isn't there. It says a man conquers. What does it mean, conquer? It means it's like you, ish darko lichbosh. Lichbosh is like to create like a road, like a kvish. You see a bush, and you're not passive. You're saying, okay, let's trample the bush and create a road. Let's pass the barrier. Let's create something new in reality. It's not going to happen of itself. I'm going to work on it. It's going to happen. But with femininity, it's different. The feminine is there. You just have to let go of all the excess energy or the excess things that are not feminine. This is, by the way, gives us the beautiful answer to one of the most famous questions about Orthodox Judaism and about our Siddur, which is why in the morning men say, Baruch shelo asani isha, thank you Hashem for not making me a woman, whereas the woman says, for most Siddurim, Chabad they just don't say anything, but most Siddurim, most denominations, they say, Baruch she'asani kirtzono. And many people think it's demeaning to women because he's being joyful for not being created a woman, and she's saying, oh, you made me as you want. And it sounds like less. So now we can answer this, but we have to go 2 steps before. Both of them say 2 blessings before this. So both the man and the woman say, Baruch shelo asani goy, thank you for not creating me a non-Jew. Baruch shelo asani eved, thank you for not creating me a slave. And then the man says, Baruch shelo asani gever, Baruch shelo asani isha, thank you for not creating me a woman. And the woman says, asani kirtzono, making me as you wanted, as you will. And so the question begins before. Why do we say, thank you for not making me a non-Jew, and not, thank you for making me Jewish? Thank you for creating me Jewish. And why do we say, thank you for not creating me a slave, instead of saying, thank you for creating me a free person? So the answer is that for all 3, that wouldn't be the right blessing to say. You are not a Jew, is not born a Jew. You are born not a non-Jew, not a goy. What does it mean? It means you're ethnically Jewish, but it's not enough. To be Jewish is something you have to work on. It's not going to happen. You can be ethnically Jewish, but you're not connected to Judaism, to Yiddishkeit, to the Torah, to the commandments. So you just say the blessing, thank you for creating me as part of this nation, and then I have the potential to become a real Jew by the choices I make. It's up to me. So I say the blessing, Baruch shelo asani goy, for not creating me a non-Jew. Same goes for being a free person. If you're born to a family that's not in servitude, we don't have slaves today, but if you're born into a family, does that make you free? No. You can be a slave to your passions, you can be a slave to something you're addicted to, you can be a slave to your self-image, you can be a slave to so many things. You are created not a slave, not a servant, or not a handmaid. You want to be free? That takes a lifetime of work. You have to work all your life to really become free. Same goes for masculinity. A man is not born a man. He's born not a woman. You want to become a man, masculinity, it's an acquired trait. You're not born with masculinity. It's never, don't wait for it to happen, and don't regret the fact that you're not masculine enough. It's something you have to work on by overcoming barriers, by setting goals, by striving towards them, by making yourself a self-made man, davka. But with femininity, it's not like masculinity or like being free or like being Jewish. It is there. Femininity is there. Baruch shasani kirtzano. Thank you for making me as you wanted, as you wished. I am already a woman, but I also have work to do. To become from sarai to sarah, but it's a different kind of work. It's not a work of actively adding things that are not there and changing. It's the opposite. It's letting go of everything that is hiding, peeling away everything that is hiding, that is standing between me and my natural femininity. So this, just looking at this whole story, that we have Avraham and Sarah, we have their names, Avram and Sarai, and then we have the name change, and it goes along with the other midrash of the tumtumim and him extending to become a male, and her having her womb being carved out or letting something go in order to become feminine. It's just a beautiful, beautiful way of thinking about what does it mean masculinity and femininity to begin with. Now, another thing, when you have a relationship in which the two partners blame each other for not being who they should be, and because of this, I'm not who I should be, but it's not my fault, it's your fault, because if you would be different, I would also be, but you're not letting me. So how do you get out of that? So there's only one way to get out of that, and that you stop blaming the other and work on yourself. So that's another beautiful, beautiful thing we get from this story. And the question is, who changed the name first? Did Avram become Avraham first and then Sarai become Sarah, or was it the other way around? So it's tricky. If you read the verses, Avraham comes first. I have the written Torah, it's eternal. I look at the written Torah, it says very clearly, Avram becomes Avraham, only a few verses later, Sarah becomes Sarai. That's the written Torah. I look at the oral Torah, I told you this. How did the name change take place? He took the name Sarai, split the Yud, left the Hey in its place, and moved the other Hey to Avraham. According to this, whose name changed first? Sarah. What is the relationship between the written Torah and the oral Torah? The written Torah is masculine. It was given by God from above to below. The oral Torah is feminine. It is built up gradually over the generations from the bottom up through the congregation of Israel, which is feminine. So if you look at the masculine Torah, it tells you, men, you need to change first. Don't wait for your wives. Even if they're still Sarai, even if they're not being feminine the way you wanted, the way you dreamed, you don't wait. You start changing. It'll help them change also. But if you look at the feminine aspect of the Torah, the oral Torah, it tells you, women, don't wait for your husbands. You can't wait for them. You have to change. You go change yourself first, girl, and then he'll change afterwards. And elu ve'elu, these and these are words of the living God. We have the two aspects of the Torah. And basically the message is, men listen to the masculine message, and women listen to the feminine message. And either way, the message is really the same. Don't wait for the other one to change. But once you start changing, the whole energetic circulation in the home is going to change. Okay. The names have been changed, meaning really, each one of them started working on himself. It's not just a name change. Avram becoming Avraham means he's now doing the work. He's going to work on his masculinity. And he's not fighting with her. And doesn't have and she's the same. She's now letting him go, and she's working on her name changes. She's working to become from Sarai to Sarah. The chapter ends, the parsha ends, and we get to our parsha, Vayera. The curtain closed, curtain opens on our parsha. And it's just like a theater. There's a new scene. Sun rises. It's 3 days after the Brit Milah. The Brit Milah goes along with the name change. The name change went along with Avraham. It's another allusion to the rectification of the masculinity. The Brit Milah, the circumcision, is refining the masculine. You have the extension of the masculine, but in order for that not to be aggressive or what is now called toxic masculinity. Toxic has the same letters in Hebrew as foreskin. Ra'il, Ra'al, and Orla. The toxic, so today it's overextended, that term, but there is toxic masculinity. It's the aggressive, the taker and not the giver. And so he refines his masculinity. This is what the Brit Milah stands for. It's 3 days later, and we have the following scene. Curtain opens, sun rises, we see the tent. Avraham is sitting outside the tent. Sarah is sitting inside the tent. Just this image, it's like the image of classic, stereotypical masculinity and femininity. Before, it was all mixed up. He was half feminine, she was half masculine. They got into this fight, and it became worse and worse because it's a cycle. Now they separated, they went each to work on their own thing, and now the curtain opens, and we see a beautiful image. He's on the outside, she's on the inside. He is masculine, he's looking for new guests to bring in, and she's modest, she's on the inside waiting. The angels come, and the first thing they say is, "Where is Sarah?" And he says, "She's in the tent." Rashi says, why they knew where she was. Why did they ask? So he answers, they asked in order to make him like her even more, because when he said that she's inside, it reminded him that she is this modest, Hamish woman who's sort of in the house, and the roles that they're playing are very now clear, very delineated. Now again, this is stereotypical, and today many people, they don't like the stereotypes, but the story isn't over. This is on the way to becoming something even more complex and more beautiful. But they have to go through this stage. This is the stage of saying, in order for the man to develop a feminine side, and in order for the woman to develop a masculine side, they can't rush to that stage. They have to accept and be embodied within their body and their gender, including the stereotypical baggage or associations or roles that go along with this. Why? Because only then can the feminine aspect within the man not be at the expense of his masculinity. And her masculine aspect, which will come in a minute, will not be at the expense of her femininity. So they have to go through this very sort of clear stage. And this is in fact what enables them to come together and finally be fruitful. And when the angels are saying that, and Rashi says it's in order to make him like her, they're warming up for what they're about to do, which is bless them with having a child. They need to be together. And so this whole thing is sort of moving towards coming back together, but this time it's far clearer who's the man and who's the woman, and they're not afraid of this stage. They were afraid of this stage. Maybe that's the reason she was so masculine and he was so feminine, because they didn't like the stereotypes. They said, "What? We have to be like with this. It's so banal. It doesn't give room for the individual, and not all men are the same. Not all women are the same." But now they're realizing that it's a stage you have to go through. So the metaphor I like to use for this is, it comes from painting in watercolor. When you paint in watercolor, anyone who's ever tried this knows, and even if you haven't tried it, you can imagine. The beauty comes from mixing shades, obviously. As you have those that come in your pack, and then what happens when you start mixing the basic colors, you get all the interesting shades and combinations. But you have to be patient with watercolor. If you make one brush stroke, and you don't wait for it to dry, and then you do the other brush stroke, you're not going to get a beautiful shade of combination. It's going to become all brown and muddy. And only if you let the first, although it's a very simple blue or a very simple red, and it's boring red or boring blue, but let it dry. And after it dries, you can put another brush stroke on it, and you put the red on the blue, or the blue on the red, and you get this very beautiful purple that comes out. But if you don't wait, it's going to be muddied. If you don't, our generation today, people feel that the stereotypical images of masculinity and femininity has become too narrow. It's too suffocating. We can't stand it. We want to break out of it. People are so different, and women want to be tomboys, or they want to be career women, or they want to be. And that's great. And men want to be more homey, or more sensitive, or more emotional, and that's also great. But if you rush towards the interinclusion and you don't go through the separation stage of what is masculinity and femininity, and what do they mean? Is all the associations that go along masculinity and femininity, all those classical roles, we have to totally throw them out. They have no meaning today. They don't reflect anything that's eternal, that's real. If you throw them all away and you rush to the interinclusion stage, you're not going to get interinclusion. You're going to get a muddied mixture, an androgynous mixture that creates all the fights between the men and the women, and all that we saw before, because it's not clear who's the man, who's the woman, what is a man, what is a woman, even, because no one likes that kind of language, or again, that binary, stereotypical language. But if you're not afraid of the binary stage, and you go through it, you can then proceed to the stage of the interinclusion, and then it's the real interinclusion. Then you let the color dry of each one. Each one is embodied in their own gender identity, in their physical, biological gender identity, and then they can add. They can create the mosaic of their own personality, which is a mixture of masculine and feminine traits, and each one is a different mosaic. But this mosaic is embodied in a reality that's very binary. It's masculine and feminine. So this image now of him being in the tent and outside the tent, and her being inside the tent, is through this stage. And this enables them to now procreate, again, physically and not only physically, to have this fertile interaction. And Yitzchak is born. Yitzchak is laughter, it's joy. And Yitzchak is born, and it goes wonderful. And now we get to the final stage, and the most interesting stage. Because it turns out that after Yitzchak is born, and each one has their own role to play, and each one is we know who the man, we know who the woman is. It's not the end of the story. Because the end of the story, we discover, is that it turns out that Sarah is a bigger prophet than Abraham. She has access to prophecy that he does not have access to. And regarding that prophecy, she needs to be the mashpia, the teacher, the giver, the one who extends outward, the masculine. And he needs to be the student, the receiver. It's like she's spiritually impregnating him. She's the masculine, and he's the feminine.
The influencer.
Yes, she's the influencer, and he's the receiver. She's the bestower, the influencer, and he's the receiver. It's a role reversal. That's what they were meant to be all along. But when they tried to rush towards that stage, it didn't work out. But now that they went one step backwards and they went for the binary, simple associations, now it can take place. And now we have a beautiful mirror image of the first incident. Again, it involves Hagar. Again, it involves Hagar being sent away. But this time, everything is different. It's the opposite. And it goes beautifully well. How does it go? Yitzchak is born, and then Ishmael, who's 13 years or 14 years older, he starts mitzachek, and there's many explanations what it was, but he had bad influence, or he's even trying to kill him, he's trying to hurt him, and Sarah realizes, and this is her prophecy, that they were not meant to be raised together. That Hagar and Ishmael need to be sent away in order to protect the education and the life of Yitzchak. And Chazal even say she knew it was good for both parties. She knew it was even good for Ishmael. It was for both of them, for the sake of both, they needed to grow up separately. And then she comes to Abraham, but she doesn't shout, she's not angry, she doesn't accuse him of anything. She very quietly, very serenely says, Garesh et ha'ama hazot ve'et bna. You have to, let's open the verse. V'tomer le'Avraham, and she said to Avraham, Garesh ha'ama hazot ve'et bna. You have to send away the handmaid and her son, Ki lo irash ben ha'ama hazot im bni Yitzchak, for this child will not inherit, shall not inherit with my son, with Yitzchak. Now, the next verse says he didn't like what he heard. Vayira davar me'od b'nei Avraham. He was very bad in his eyes. what she said. Why is this? This is just goes to show that she sees a prophecy, she sees a truth that he is not able to see. He loves both Ishmael and Yitzchak equally. He loves them both. He can't stand the thought of sending anyone away. But she can see something that goes beyond his emotions, beyond his intellect. It's a prophecy. And then God intervenes. God did not intervene in the first fight because they were all not where they should be. So he let them be at it. And he just came in and saved Hagar. Now he comes in order to back up Sarah and tell to Abraham, Al yira be'enecha, it should not be bad in your eyes. What will happen now with the boy and with Amatecha, your maidservant. Now she's called his maidservant. Kol asher tomar elecha Sarah shma bekola. Everything Sarah tells you, you should listen to her. She is now like your teacher, your master, the classic image. We just came out of the totally classic image of him being on the outside and she being on the inside, and he was like the man of the house and she was the woman of the house, and like the petite woman who's doing what she's told, and everything that people don't like today. But it turns out that this was just a stage leading up to a total role reversal, in which suddenly she is the one who's telling him what to do, and he has to obey, without understanding and without appreciating what she's saying, and even thinking it's very bad. This role reversal is exactly her developing her masculine aspect, and now he has to develop his feminine aspect and listen to her. But why does it work? Because when she becomes masculine, it doesn't threaten his masculinity because she's now so feminine. So this masculine element is added and he can hear it. And he can become feminine, but it doesn't ruin anything because he's so masculine by now that when he adopts this stance of being the feminine, it works wonderfully well because they let the watercolor dry. And now they're adding the other element. And now it becomes even more beautiful. So God tells him, everything she tells you, you need to listen to her voice. She knows what she's doing. What's the next verse? He gets up first thing in the morning and takes care of it himself. Before he said, oh, she's your maidservant and you should take care of her. Now he says, no, I'm taking full responsibility. And it's not in this roundabout way of making her life miserable, letting her run away. He prepares the donkey, he gives her food, gives her water, sends her on her way, the way it should be. And so this is just a beautiful, beautiful, mirror image, counter image of the first incident. And the real drama here is that before, both felt that it is their destiny not to obey the simplistic gender binary. But because they rushed towards the interinclusion stage, and they didn't like, or were not willing to connect to their own body, their own reality in this incarnation at least. That he's a man and she's a woman, and it's not above them to be connected to those traditional simplistic concepts. Once they were able to accept that, then they were able to fulfill their roles, and their roles included a role reversal. And then it worked beautifully because no side is threatened, no side feels that now he doesn't know what to do and his partner is not behaving the way they should. So once you play your part, you can also change your part. You can play with your part. When the time comes, you can reverse the whole thing. So this is the story of Abraham and Sarah, which is also the story of us in our generation. And Abraham and Sarah, like all the biblical figures, all our patriarchs and matriarchs, they come to teach us an eternal lesson. All of them, in a way, were ahead of their times. And came and told their stories so that we in our generation, which is now dealing with these topics even more than before, we would internalize their lesson and learn the lesson. And Be'ezrat Hashem, may we, through their inspiration, be able to really, really integrate all of us, our own innate, born gender with the traits of the opposite gender, which makes us far more mature and far more sensitive to the other's needs, and be able to play the different roles that we're called upon to play in life. Hi everyone, if you enjoyed this episode, please press like, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment. If you want more English language videos from me, please consider becoming a supporter via Patreon. You can find the link in the description below. Thank you very much, and see you in the next episode.